Welcome to my channel. Please subscribe and watch to the end. If you are new here, please subscribe so that you don't miss out on any future videos. The old widow, frail and bent with years, shuffled into the church as the morning sun streamed through the stained glass. Pastor Elias stood at the pulpit, his stern gaze sweeping the congregation. But it lingered on her worn-out shawl and tattered shoes. Unbeknownst to Pastor Elias, a shadowy figure watched from the edge of the churchyard, their eyes glinting with a mix of curiosity and malice. The widow muttered a prayer under her breath, her voice barely audible, but it carried a strange, haunting tone that seemed to stir the wind. As she touched it, a warmth spread through her frail body, and a vision flashed before her eyes. Pastor Elias kneeling in fear before a spectral figure. Candles flickered wildly despite the still air, and a low hum vibrated through the pews. Pastor Elias stumbled over his words, his confidence shaken as he felt an unseen presence pressing against his chest. The boy from the back row tugged at his mother's sleeve, whispering about the figure in the glass again. This time, it was pointing directly at the pastor. Her hands shook as she realized the pendant held power, a legacy from her late husband she'd never understood. With a newfound resolve, she whispered a name, something ancient and forbidden: sand. The air around her crackled with energy. As the church doors slammed shut behind her, a low rumble echoed in the distance. Something unnatural was brewing, and it would soon turn the pastor's world upside down. Whispers had been circulating about her inability to contribute to the collection plate, and today his patience snapped. With a voice that boomed like thunder, he pointed at her and declared, "You bring nothing but shame to this sacred place. Leave now." The congregation gasped, some turning away in discomfort, while the widow's tear-streaked face trembled as she was escorted out by two deacons. Outside, the air was thick with the scent of rain as the widow collapsed onto the steps, clutching a small weathered prayer book. Inside, Pastor Elias resumed his sermon, smug in his authority, oblivious to the growing unease among his flock. The deacons exchanged nervous glances. The young boy in the back row swore. He saw a flicker of movement in the stained glass figure that was in T part of the design. The widow's expulsion was meant to send a message, but it had unleashed something far darker, something that would soon crawl out of the shadows to exact a price no one could anticipate. That night, Pastor Elias dreamed of a towering figure cloaked in black, its face obscured, but its voice a chilling whisper that accused him of betrayal. He awoke in a cold sweat, the echo of the widow's prayer ringing in his ears, though he couldn't recall her words. The next morning, he found his study in disarray, books flung from shelves, a cracked mirror reflecting a distorted version of his own face. He dismissed it as a prank, but the unease gnawed at him as he prepared for Sunday service, unaware that the widow had taken shelter in an abandoned shed nearby. The widow, meanwhile, discovered an ancient pendant hidden within the pages of her prayer book, its surface etched with symbols she didn't recognize. Back at the church, the congregation noticed strange occurrences during the service. By midweek, the village buzzed with rumors of the widow's curse, though no one dared speak to her. Pastor Elias, determined to reclaim his authority, gathered the deacons to confront her. Armed with scriptures and a resolve to banish what he called her wicked influence, they marched to the shed, but as they approached, a sudden gust of wind tore the door open, revealing the widow standing tall, the pendant glowing faintly at her neck. Her eyes, once dim with sorrow, now burned with an otherworldly light, and she spoke in a voice that wasn't entirely her own. "You cast me out, but you cannot cast out what protects me." The deacons froze as the ground beneath them trembled, and a shadowy form rose behind the widow, its edges shimmering like smoke. Pastor Elias raised his Bible, shouting prayers, but the words seemed to dissolve in the air. The shadow lunged, and one deacon screamed as he was flung back, landing unconscious against a tree. The pastor's bravado faltered as he realized this was no ordinary woman. He had awakened something ancient, and it was hungry for retribution. As the group retreated, the widow sank to her knees, the pendant's glow fading. She clutched it tightly, whispering apologies to the spirit she'd summoned, unsure if she could control it. Back at the church, the stained glass figure now bore the widow's face, its expression a mix of sorrow and vengeance. Pastor Elias locked himself in his office, poring over old texts, desperate to find a way to undo what he'd started, but the pages seemed to shift, revealing warnings he'd never noticed before. The next day, the church bell rang on its own, a mournful toll that drew the village to the square. Pastor Elias emerged, pale and disheveled, claiming the widow had bewitched the bell. The crowd murmured, some siding with him out of fear, others whispering that his actions had brought this upon them. As he tried to rally them, a crack split the bell tower, and a dark mist seeped out, coalescing into the shadowy figure from the widow's vision. It pointed at Elias, and the crowd scattered, leaving him alone with the entity. The widow, sensing the chaos, approached the church, the pendant pulsing with each step. She hadn't meant for this, she only wanted justice, but the spirit seemed to have its own agenda. Inside her mind, she heard a voice, deep and resonant, promising to punish the pastor, but demanding a price. Torn between her faith and her anger, she hesitated at the threshold, the pendant's warmth turning cold against her skin. Elias faced the shadow, his prayers failing as it closed in. Suddenly, the figure spoke, its voice a blend of the widow's and something ancient. You cast out the innocent, now face the consequence. The pastor fell to his knees, begging for mercy, but the shadow's hand reached for him, and the church plunged into darkness. When the light returned, Elias was gone, leaving only his clerical collar on the floor. The village awoke to the news of Pastor Elias's disappearance, and fear gripped every heart. The widow returned to her shed, the pendant silent but heavy around her neck, its power a burden she couldn't shake. As she read, the shadowy figure appeared, but instead of attacking, it gestured toward a hidden compartment. Inside, she found a journal Elias owned detailing his growing greed and the widow's eviction as a way to seize her meager land. The revelation fueled her determination to expose him. She prayed for guidance, but the spirit's voice lingered, hinting at more to come. But not before leaving a warning. Elias was alive, trapped in a realm between worlds, and his return would bring chaos. Mara stayed by her side, poring over the journal for answers, discovering a passage about a guardian's heart that could break the spirit's hold. They interpreted it as a test of courage, and Mara proposed confronting the spirit one last time, this time with the widow's blessing. The spirit turned, distracted, and the widow seized the moment, pressing the pendant to her chest and chanting a prayer. A blinding light erupted, and when it faded, the spirit was gone, the pendant shattered, and Elias lay still, his threat ended at last. The deacons vowed to help. But Mara noticed the widow's hands trembling. The pendant's power was taking its toll, and the spirit's hold was growing stronger. The widow, frail but resolute, insisted they find a way to free her, even if it meant facing another battle. The defenders armed themselves with faith in the journal, ready to delve into the church's dark secrets, unaware that the girl's rescue might come at a devastating cost. The shattered pendant left the widow vulnerable, and rumors spread of a new presence in the church, subtler but no less eerie. Determined to protect her, Mara began training others to stand guard, forming a small band of defenders from the curious and the brave. Meanwhile, a young woman named Mara, bold and curious, decided to investigate, sneaking into the church to find clues about the pastor's fate. Inside, Mara found the cracked bell tower in Elias's office, where the shifting texts now revealed a prophecy about a guardian spirit awakened by injustice. The widow, leaning on Mara, raised the pendant and called the spirit forth. It emerged, towering and wrathful, demanding the widow's soul. Mara stepped forward, heart pounding, and declared her willingness to take the widow's place, her bravery a shield against the entity's fury. The spirit hesitated, its form flickering, as if weighing her offer. Mara glimpsed a new figure in the stained glass, a young girl with the widow's eyes. The widow admitted she'd felt the girl's presence since the ritual, a spirit tied to her past, perhaps a lost daughter. The revelation stunned Mara, who wondered if the pendant had unleashed more than one entity, each with its own agenda. Back at the shed, the widow felt a tug on the pendant as Mara's discovery unfolded. The spirit whispered of an alliance, offering to protect the village if the widow embraced its power fully. The widow's hands shook as she read, the pendant glowing brighter with each page. The spirit's voice grew insistent, urging her to unleash its full wrath, but she pleaded for a peaceful resolution, her heart torn between vengeance and redemption. Together, They decided to confront the deacons, hoping to rally support against Ilias's lingering influence. She resisted, fearing the cost, but the ground shook again, and the church's stained glass shattered outward, raining colored shards across the square. Something was coming, and it wouldn't wait for her decision. Mara rushed to the widow with the journal, her voice trembling as she recounted Elisa's deceit. The deacons, still shaken from their encounter, met them in the churchyard. Mara presented the journal, and the truth unraveled. Elias had planned to sell the widow's land to fund his lavish lifestyle. The deacons' anger turned to guilt, but before they could act, the shadowy figure reappeared. Its form more solid now, its eyes fixed on the group. The widow stepped forward, raising the pendant, and commanded it to stand down, her voice echoing with newfound authority.
And
The standoff ended with a deafening silence as the spirit retreated. The village began to heal, with the deacons stepping up to lead. But the widow's health declined. The pendants weighed a constant reminder of her burden. That night, under a moonless sky, they returned to the churchyard. Suddenly the ground split, and a hand reached out. Elias, clawing his way back, his eyes wild with madness. The village celebrated the widow's survival, hailing her as a hero, but Mara noticed a subtle change in her friend's demeanor. Quiet sadness lingered. One evening as they patrolled, a cold wind carried whispers from the church. As they investigated, the girl's voice echoed, pleading for help. The defenders gathered in the church, the air thick with anticipation, as they prepared to confront the girl's spirit. The widow led the way, her voice steady as she recounted a long-buried memory of a daughter lost to illness decades ago. The stained-glass girl watched silently, her expression shifting from sorrow to urgency. Mara traced the journal's symbols on the floor, hoping to replicate the ritual, but the pages warned of a second gate that could trap them all. As they chanted, the portal reopened, but this time it revealed a lush, otherworldly garden where the girl stood, beckoning. The widow stepped forward, tears streaming, but Mara held her back, sensing a trap. The girl's voice turned sharp, demanding the widow join her, and the defenders froze as the garden's beauty gave way to twisted vines that lashed out. The widow's cry pierced the air as a vine grazed her arm, drawing blood. The portal began to close, but the girl's spirit surged, pulling the widow toward the gate. Mara lunged, grabbing her friend, and the defenders fought the vines with sheer will. The journal slipped from Mara's hands, landing open to a phrase: "Break the heart to free the soul." Acting on instinct, the widow smashed a stained glass shard against the pendant's remnants, and the portal collapsed, leaving the girl's scream echoing into silence. The widow collapsed, exhausted but alive, as the church fell silent once more. Mara tended to her wound, the defenders marveling at their narrow escape, but the air remained heavy with unresolved tension. The shattered glass and journal hinted at deeper secrets, and Mara couldn't shake the feeling that the girl's spirit lingered, waiting. The widow, regaining strength, spoke of a dream where her daughter promised to return. A promise that chilled Mara to the bone. Days later, children playing near the church reported seeing the girl's figure in the ruins, her eyes following them. The defenders investigated, finding footprints that vanished into thin air, leading to a hidden cellar beneath the altar. Inside they uncovered an old cradle, its wood etched with the same symbols as the pendant, suggesting the girl's spirit was tied to the church itself, not just the widow's past. The widow joined them, her resolve hardening. She declared they must perform a final ritual to release her daughter, even if it meant facing the spirit's wrath again. The defenders agreed, but as they prepared, a low hum emanated from the cradle, and the temperature dropped. Something was awakening, and it wasn't ready to let go. The cellar grew colder as the defenders lit candles around the cradle, the hum intensifying into a mournful wail. The widow knelt, tears falling as she spoke to her daughter, pleading for peace. Mara read from the journal, adapting the ritual to focus on release rather than banishment, her voice steady despite the rising wind. The girl's spirit appeared, her form more solid now, her eyes locked on the widow with a mix of love and desperation. The spirit reached out, and the widow took her hand, a surge of energy linking them. The defenders watched, awestruck, as memories flashed: laughter, a fevered night, a tiny grave. The cradle glowed, and the girl's voice whispered, "Forgive me," before her form began to fade. But the wind turned violent, and the cellar shook. Another presence, darker and older, emerged from the shadows. its laughter drowning out the girl's farewell. Mara shouted for the widow to break the connection, but the spirit held fast, its grip tightening. The defenders grabbed the cradle, smashing it against the wall, and the glow shattered, releasing a shockwave. When the dust settled, the girl was gone, the widow unconscious, and the darker presence retreated, leaving a promise of return etched into the cellar wall. The widow awoke days later, her memory hazy but her spirit lighter, as if a weight had lifted. Mara and the defenders buried the cradle's remains, vowing to guard the church against future threats. But the etched promise, "I will rise," haunted their thoughts. The village slowly returned to normal, though whispers of the girl's spirit lingered, a tale to frighten children. The widow, frail but determined, began teaching Mara about the pendant's history, hinting at a lineage of guardians. One night, as they studied, a knock echoed through the shed. Opening the door, they found a stranger cloaked in rags, bearing a box carved with the same symbols. Inside lay a new pendant, identical to the first, its surface warmed at the touch. The stranger vanished before they could question him, leaving Mara and the widow staring at the ominous gift, their hearts sinking with dread. The pendant pulsed, and the widow's vision blurred with images of a towering figure returning, its chains broken. She clutched Mara's hand, whispering that the battle wasn't over. The stranger had brought a warning, and the church's dark legacy was far from buried. The new pendant's warmth turned to a burn, forcing the widow to set it down, where it pulsed like a heartbeat. Mara suggested destroying it, but the widow hesitated, sensing her daughter's presence within it. The defenders rushed to find the stained glass restored, the girl's face replaced by the towering figure from the widow's vision. Its eyes glowed and the ground trembled as it spoke through the glass. "The guardianess' blood is mine." The widow paled, realizing the pendant tied her lineage to this entity, a debt unpaid for generations. They decided to consult the journal again, finding a passage about a cursed heirloom that bound spirits to its bearers. The figure shrieked, its body dissolving into mist, but the widow collapsed, her breath shallow.
Ow.
The village mourned, unaware that the mist from the entity had seeped into the earth, waiting. Mara followed, finding him at the cellar, where the etched promise glowed faintly. He revealed himself as a former guardian, cursed to serve the entity until its defeat. He handed Mara a map, its lines leading to a hidden chamber, and warned that the spirit's true form awaited their test she must face alone. The defenders buried the pendant halves, but the dagger's hum suggested the spirit's essence lingered, tied to the weapon now in Mara's care. The stranger appeared, nodding gravely. Her blood had sealed the bond, making her the new guardian. The church stood quiet, its stained glass dull, but Mara felt the dagger's weight, a constant reminder of her new role. The locket opened, revealing a note. The cycle begins anew. The dagger pulsed, and a faint whisper rose from the earth. Another spirit, perhaps the entity's creator, stirring. Mara buried it again, but the unease lingered, her guardian instincts alerting her to a new threat. The stranger vanished, leaving the map behind, its final mark pointing to an unmarked grave, a clue to the entity's origin. The widow urged caution, sensing the story wasn't fully closed. The widow, sensing the shift, awoke, her strength returning as Mara emerged, forever changed. The defenders cheered, thinking victory won. But Mara noticed the stranger's dagger now glowed, a sign that the battle had only shifted, not ended.
Ow.
Together, they vowed to uncover the truth, unaware that the locket's whisper had awakened something deep beneath the village, waiting for its moment to rise. The defenders gathered, debating whether to risk another ritual or hide the pendant away, their trust in the widow unwavering. The air was heavy with age and the walls pulsed with the entity's presence. As she stepped forward, the stranger's voice echoed. The blood of the guardian must seal it, leaving her to wonder if her life was the price as they planned. The church bells rang at midnight, though no hands touched them. The entity's voice boomed, its form coalescing into a towering figure with chains dragging behind it. It demanded the widow's life, claiming her bloodline owed a debt from centuries past. Mara raised the dagger, her resolve firm, but the stranger's warning echoed: would she become the next guardian? Mara rallied the group, insisting they fight, but the widow slumped, the pendant's pull draining her. The figure laughed, its voice echoing, "One must fall for the other to rise." The defenders armed themselves with faith and resolve. Preparing for a confrontation, unaware that the entity's power grew with each passing hour, the chamber shook, and visions flooded her mind guardians past. Their sacrifices, the widow's daughter among them. The figure roared, its form weakening, but it seized Mara, lifting her toward the altar. She stabbed the dagger into its chest, and a scream tore through the air as it dissolved into ash. "Use it to break the bond," he rasped before vanishing. The widow recognized the design from her husband's tales, a weapon meant to sever spiritual ties. Mara hesitated, but the widow nodded, guiding the blade toward the pendant as the entity roared, its form breaking through the glass. The defenders fortified the church, barricading doors and windows as the figure's presence intensified. The widow, weakened but defiant, clutched the pendant, its heat searing her palm as she channeled her will to resist. Mara led the group in a chant from the journal, hoping to weaken the entity. But the stained glass figure pulsed, its laughter shaking the walls. The air grew thick, and shadows danced, forming tendrils that tested their defenses. Suddenly, the stranger reappeared, his eyes hollow as he handed Mara a dagger etched with symbols. The dagger struck, and a blinding light erupted, the pendant splitting in two. The widow lingered between life and death, her pulse faint as Mara stayed by her side, the glowing dagger a constant reminder of their fragile triumph. Days later, a child reported seeing the stranger near the church, his form flickering like a ghost. Mara steeled herself, the dagger in hand, and descended into the chamber. The chamber revealed a stone altar, its surface stained with ancient markings, and Mara felt the dagger pulse in sync with her heartbeat. As the entity lunged, Mara slashed at its chains, the dagger glowing brighter with each strike. The chamber fell silent, but the altar glowed, and Mara's hand bled where the dagger had cut her. The widow embraced Mara, tears of relief mixing with pride as the village hailed them as saviors. That night, Mara dug at the grave, uncovering a skeleton clutching a locket with the widow's face etched inside. The widow, sensing Mara's burden, offered to train her, drawing on her own experiences. Mara's training began with the widow teaching her to sense spiritual presences, the dagger guiding her to faint echoes around the church. The locket's whisper grew louder, hinting at a ritual that had bound the entity centuries ago, its participants buried with it. The defenders joined, forming a watch to monitor the grave. But one night the earth cracked, and a skeletal hand emerged, clutching the locket. The widow rushed to the site, her voice commanding as she recited an old prayer, but the skeleton pulled itself free, its empty eyes glowing with the entity's light. Mara struck with the dagger, shattering the bones, but the locket fell intact, its whisper now a scream. The ground split wider, revealing a cavern filled with chained figures, their moans a chorus of the damned. Mara and the widow descended, the dagger leading them to a central altar where the locket pulsed. The widow recognized the symbols as her family's crest, a chilling link to the past. As they prepared to destroy it, the chained figures stirred, their voices uniting in a chant that shook the cavern. Something ancient was awakening, and it knew their names. The village buzzed with relief, but Mara and the widow knew the black stains signaled the sorcerer's lingering influence. The widow's strength waned, the curse seeping into her, yet she insisted on finding a cure. Poring over the journal with Mara, the defenders expanded their watch, reporting sightings of shadowy figures near the grave, their numbers growing. The peace was a fragile illusion. One night, the black stain spread, and the widow collapsed, her body convulsing as the sorcerer's voice invaded her mind. Mara held her, the dagger glowing faintly, and traced the journal's clues to a cleansing flame ritual, requiring a guardian sacrifice. Torn Mara prepared the ritual, hoping to save her friend without losing herself. As flames encircled the widow, the sorcerer materialized, his form solidifying from the stain. Mara struck with the dagger, the flame amplifying its power, and the sorcerer screamed, his essence burning away. The widow awoke, the stain gone, but Mara's hand bore a new mark. The guardian's burden had shifted fully to her. Mara adapted to her role, the dagger's mark a constant guide, as she trained with the widow's wisdom. The village thrived, unaware of the battles fought beneath their feet. But Mara sensed the sorcerer's defeat had weakened, not destroyed, the curse. The widow, restored, began documenting their experiences, hoping to warn future guardians. The defenders remained vigilant, their bond unbreakable. A new threat emerged when a traveler arrived, bearing a scroll etched with the sorcerer's symbols. He claimed to seek the locket's power, his eyes glinting with greed. Mara confronted him, the dagger ready, but he vanished, leaving the scroll behind. It detailed a ritual to resurrect the sorcerer, requiring the guardian's blood, a chilling echo of the stranger's warning. The widow recognized the traveler as a descendant of the original betrayers, his lineage tied to the curse. They prepared a trap using the scroll as bait, but as Mara held it, the dagger burned, and a vision flashed, the traveler summoning an army of shadows. The fight was coming, and time was running out. The trap was set in the cavern, the scroll placed on the altar as bait. Mara and the defenders hid, the dagger pulsing as the traveler arrived, his shadow army trailing behind. He struck at Mara, but she parried, the dagger's mark glowing as she channeled her guardian strength. The widow's ward faltered, and a shadow seized her, dragging her toward the altar. Mara screamed, lunging with the dagger, piercing the shardan. The cavern erupted in light. The widow chanted a ward, her voice a shield, but the traveler laughed, igniting the scroll with a dark flame. The widow, exhausted but triumphant, leaned on her, the lullabies echo a bittersweet victory. They climbed back to the surface, where the defenders cheered, but Mara's mark burned. The guardian's duty was eternal. The stranger insisted it was the only way, vanishing with a cryptic, "The choice is yours." Torn Mara weighed the cost, the shard's pulse growing louder as the sorcerer's voice whispered from within. Mara decided to face the shard alone, descending to the cavern with the dagger and a vial of the widow's blood, gathered in secret. He offered Mara a map, its symbols matching the journals, suggesting a network of guardians. The widow urged caution, but Mara's curiosity flared. She couldn't ignore others in need. The traveler warned of a council of sorcerers, their power growing, and left with a promise to return. The shard pulsed violently as she placed it on the altar, its light revealing the sorcerer's face within. They agreed to prepare the dagger, pulsing faintly, ready for the next chapter in their saga. He brought a relic, a ring etched with guardian symbols, claiming it could amplify the dagger's power. The traveler's voice whispered, "Strike now," but the widow awoke her, the ring's influence broken. They confronted him, and he fled, leaving the ring behind, a trap that nearly cost Mara her soul. The widow sensed deceit, but Mara, eager to end the threat, accepted it, the ring fitting perfectly on her finger. Unaware of the council's eyes already turning their way, Mara and the widow trained relentlessly, the map guiding them to hidden texts in the church's ruins. They uncovered tales of a guardian council once united against the sorcerers, now fractured by betrayal. The dagger's pulse grew with each discovery, its mark expanding, signaling a call to action. The village noticed Mara's growing strength, whispering of a chosen one, but she kept her focus on the mission. She chanted the cleansing ritual, the widow's blood dripping onto the stone. And the cavern shook as the sorcerer's voice roared, fighting to break free. The village celebrated, oblivious to the shard's lingering threat. Shadows surged, overwhelming the defenders, and Mara fought her way to the altar, the dagger her only hope. The village slept, unaware of the battle, but Mara sensed a new presence, a guardian spirit, not malevolent, watching over them. The war was over, but her role as guardian remained, a legacy she'd carry with pride. Peace settled over the village, the church restored as a place of solace, its stained glass now depicting the widow and Mara as heroes. The widow, her health returning, taught Mara the guardian's ways, their bond deepening into a familial tie. The defenders disbanded, their watch no longer needed, but Mara kept the dagger close, its mark a quiet reminder. The shard's ash was scattered, its threat ended, or so they hoped. The widow warned of its danger, suggesting a ritual to unbind it, but the journal offered no clear solution. As they planned, the stranger reappeared, his form weaker, and revealed the shard held the sorcerer's soul, a piece that could resurrect him if not destroyed properly. The traveler revealed a shard of the locket, its power reviving the sorcerer's essence within him. The shadows dissolved, the traveler fell, and the widow was freed, but the altar cracked open, revealing a deeper chamber. The light dimmed, and the shard crumbled to ash, but the altar glowed. Projecting a vision, the sorcerer's defeat had freed his victims, their spirits rising to peace. Mara wept, feeling the mark fade slightly, a sign of her burden lightening. The sorcerer's voice echoed, "You cannot escape me." As Mara and the widow stared into the abyss, knowing the true battle awaited below. The deeper chamber was a labyrinth of stone, its walls pulsing with the sorcerer's energy. Mara led the way, the dagger guiding them through twisting corridors, while the widow followed, her strength bolstered by faith. The air grew thick, and whispers assaulted their minds, testing their resolve. The defenders waited above, praying for their return, unaware of the horrors below. They reached a central chamber where the sorcerer stood, his form a grotesque fusion of bone and shadow, the locket's shards orbiting him. He taunted the widow, claiming her daughter's spirit fueled his power, and lunged with tendrils of darkness. Mara seized the moment, driving the dagger into his core. The shards shattered, and the sorcerer screamed, his form collapsing into dust. But a single shard remained, pulsing with a faint light, hinting at a fragment of his essence escaping. Mara slashed with the dagger, each strike weakening him, but the shards reformed, his laughter growing. The widow, drawing on her last reserves, sang an old lullaby, her daughter's favoritettes, melody piercing the sorcerer's defenses. The chamber fell silent, the shard's light fading as Mara pocketed it, vowing to destroy it later. That night Mara studied the shard, its pulse syncing with her heartbeat. The widow proposed a final cleansing, using the dagger in her blood, but Mara refused to risk her. The dagger flared, and Mara plunged it into the shard, a scream tearing through the air as the sorcerer's essence burned away. Returning to the surface, she found the widow waiting, her eyes knowing. One evening, a traveler arrived, bearing news of similar disturbances elsewhere, hinting at other cursed relics. Mara showed the map to the widow, who recognized a symbol as her husband's, tying their lineage to this wider fight. The traveler returned, revealing himself as a rogue council member, offering alliance against the sorcerer's resurgence. That night, the ring glowed, and Mara fell into a vision, sorcerers chanting over a new locket. Its power rivaling the old, the widow destroyed the ring, its ashes joining the shards, but the vision lingered, driving Mara to seek the sorcerer's lair. The map pointed to a distant ruin, and with the widow's blessing, she set out, the dagger her guide. The village offered supplies, their faith in her unshakable, but the journey promised danger. The widow stayed, guarding the church, her prayers a lifeline. Mara traversed wild lands, the dagger leading her to a cavern where the sorcerer's chants echoed. She found them around a new locket, its power awakening. Using the journal's tactics, she disrupted their ritual, the dagger cutting through their defenses. The locket pulsed, and the lead sorcerer challenged her, his power matching hers. In a desperate clash, Mara drove the dagger into the locket, a blast throwing her back. The sorcerers fell, their lair collapsing, but the locket's shard embedded in her arm, its whisper faint but alive. She staggered out, victorious but marked anew, the guardian's burden heavier than ever. Mara returned, the shard in her arm a silent threat, but the village greeted her as a legend. The widow tended her wound, the journal offering no cure, suggesting the shard's presence was now part of her. They accepted it, vowing to face whatever came next together. The church stood as a beacon, its stained glass a testament to their journey. The dagger's mark stabilized, and Mara felt a new presence, guardian spirits, united in her cause. The widow smiled, her role shifting to mentor, their legacy secure. As they looked to the horizon, a faint whisper rose from the shard, hinting at a distant evil, but for now they rested. Ready for the battles ahead, their bond unbreakable. The village thrived, tales of Mara and the widow spreading, inspiring hope. The church's peace held, but the shard's pulse reminded them the fight for justice never truly ends, and their story would echo through time.